welcome to this deep dive. I'm so excited to get into all this great material you provided.
Yeah, this is going to be fun.
Okay, so we've got Keo ebook-m1.pdf.pdf. And by the way, I noticed there's some Spanish mixed in with the English in this one.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, should be interesting. And of course, we've got the classic Influence by Cialdini.
Always a good one.
It seems like you're really focused on communication skills, maybe even persuasion.
Yeah, looks like it.
Well, I think this deep dive is going to be perfect for that. We'll uncover some really practical tips, and who knows, maybe we'll even bust a few myths along the way.
Sounds good to me.
Okay, so before we get into all that, I just had to share this one thing I learned that totally blew my mind.
Okay.
So, Warren Buffett, the greatest investor of all time.
Yeah, of course.
Well, would you believe that he was actually terrified of public speaking in college?
Really? I had no idea. Wow. That's incredible.
It really is. It kind of makes you think that if someone like Warren Buffett struggled with communication, it must be something that can be learned, right?
Yeah. Absolutely. It really highlights that communication is a skill you can develop. Like, even someone as brilliant as Buffett had to work at it.
Exactly. And speaking of that, one of the sources you provided actually says that communication is not a gift, but a habit.
I like that.
So you don't have to be born with charisma.
Yeah.
You can actually train yourself to be a better communicator.
Yeah, it's all about putting in the work and developing those habits.
I love that. Okay, so speaking of training yourself, let's talk about persuasion. One of your sources, it brings up Robert Cialdini.
Oh, the father of persuasion.
Yes, exactly.
Wait.
And he says that we're way more likely to be influenced by people that we like, admire, or who we feel are similar to us.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
It really does. So it's not just about trying to, manipulate people.
Right.
It's about building genuine connections. We're not trying to become master manipulators here.
No, definitely not.
We're trying to learn how to communicate authentically and build real relationships.
I like that.
Okay, so remember that 738-55 rule?
Oh, yeah, that's a classic.
It says that only 7% of communication is the actual words we say.
Right. 38% is our tone of voice.
And then a whole 55% is body language.
That's the one that always surprises me.
It really is amazing, right?
Yeah.
It's like we're communicating so much without even realizing it.
Absolutely.
So let's talk about body language for a second. The CO ebook, it emphasizes good posture. Shoulders back, making eye contact, having a genuine smile.
Oh, yeah, those are the basics.
It sounds super simple, but honestly, I think a lot of people forget about it. Just try it right now, straightening your back and shoulders. Do you feel a little bit more confident?
I actually do, yeah.
Right. It's like a little instant confidence boost.
Yeah.
The CO ebook also has some pretty cool charisma strategies.
Oh, like what?
Well, for example, it talks about smiling. Did you know that smiling actually releases endorphins?
Really, it does?
Yeah, it releases all these feel-good hormones like serotonin and dopamine.
Mm.
So smiling not only makes you feel better, but it can actually make other people feel better too.
Wow. Smiling is a superpower.
I know, right? It also talks about elongating your vowels a little bit.
What do you mean?
Instead of saying hello, say hello. It's supposed to make you sound more friendly and approachable.
Hello.
You see.
I kind of like it.
I know, right? It's a little strange at first, but it really does make a difference. And then there's this thing called limbic synchrony, which basically means mirroring the other person's behavior.
Yeah, I've heard of that.
It's supposed to help build rapport. And it's something that we often do unconsciously.
Yeah, like if you're with someone who's really enthusiastic, you might find yourself getting more enthusiastic too.
Exactly. But if you're aware of it, we can actually use it intentionally to build stronger connections. Okay, are you ready to get into some of the psychology stuff?
Hit me with it.
All right, let's talk about mental triggers. These are like little shortcuts that our brains use.
Ooh, I like shortcuts.
Yeah, they can influence our decisions without us even realizing it.
That's kind of scary and fascinating.
I know. So one of the examples in the CO ebook is the because study.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Tell me more.
So researchers found that if you ask someone for a favor and you give them a reason, even if it's a totally bogus reason, they're more likely to say yes.
Wait, really?
Yeah, it's crazy. Just adding the word because increases compliance.
The power of because. I'm going to have to try that.
I know, right?
Mm-hmm.
It makes you realize just how much is going on in our brains that we're not even aware of.
For sure.
Another thing the source talks about is consistency. We have this deep need to appear consistent in our thoughts and actions. And it's not just about logic. It's actually about social pressure. We don't want to look flaky or unpredictable.
So we're more likely to stick with something even if we kind of don't want to, just to seem consistent.
Yeah. And there's a great example of this in the source. It's a study about a cancer institute.
Yeah.
They wanted people to volunteer, right? So they asked people to take this short survey about their willingness to volunteer later. And guess what? Just saying yes to that survey actually increased the number of people who actually did volunteer later on.
Wow. So even just a small commitment can have a big impact down the road.
Exactly. So the COE book suggests this really cool tip. Before you ask someone for a favor, try complimenting them first. Like if you're at a restaurant and you want to ask your waiter for something, you could say, "You're the nicest waiter I've ever had," and then ask for what you need.
I can see how that would work. It kind of makes them feel obligated to live up to that compliment.
Exactly. It taps into that desire to be consistent. Okay, so another biggie when it comes to persuasion is social proof.
Oh, yeah, that's a big one.
Basically, we tend to look to others to validate our choices.
Like, if everyone else is doing something, it must be the right thing to do.
Right. It's like that old Havaianas slogan, everyone wears them.
And you know what? I actually do own a pair of Havaianas.
It works.
Hmm.
Or how about when a menu highlights the most popular dish?
Oh, yeah. I always find myself drawn to those.
It's like a shortcut for our brains. We're like, well, if everyone else likes it, it must be good. Okay, so the COE book introduces this really cool visual, the communication triangle.
I'm curious. Tell me about it.
Okay, so picture a triangle. At the center, there's with all your values and beliefs and everything that makes you unique.
Got it.
Then the two sides of the triangle are voice and body.
Okay, so you're saying that all three of those need to be working together for effective communication.
Exactly. It's a great way to visualize all the different elements that come into play. The source also talks about another triangle.
There's another one.
Yeah, it's the classic sender-receiver message model.
Oh, yeah, right. I remember learning about that.
It basically emphasizes the importance of knowing your audience, or, as the COE book calls it, your network.
Your network, right. Because communication is all about creating shared understanding, right?
Exactly. And to do that effectively, you need to tailor your message to resonate with the specific people you're trying to reach. So there's no one-size-fits-all approach to communication.
Totally agree. Different audiences have different needs and expectations. What works for one group might totally flop with another.
Okay, so knowing your audience is key. But how do we actually do that?
That's a great question.
Well, the COE book gives some helpful tips. First, think about demographics, age, background, profession, interests.
Right.
But then you got to go a little deeper and consider their values and beliefs and their communication style too. Like, are they formal or informal? Do they prefer directness or a more subtle approach?
Those are all really important factors to consider.
It's about getting to know your audience on a deeper level so you can connect with them authentically. Okay, so let's switch gears for a sec and talk about something that I think we all struggle with from time to time. Dealing with difficult people.
Ooh, yeah, that's a tough one.
We've all encountered them, right? The interrupters, the chronic complainers, those who are passive-aggressive.
Ugh, yeah. They can be tough to handle.
So I was wondering, does the COE book offer any advice on dealing with these challenging personalities?
Well, it doesn't specifically talk about difficult people, but it does offer some really interesting insights that I think we can apply to those situations. Like, remember Olympic synchrony, that mirroring thing we were talking about?
Yeah.
Well, it turns out that can be surprisingly effective in building rapport, even with someone who's being difficult.
So if someone's being aggressive, I should match their energy.
Not exactly. It's not about mimicking negative behavior, but about subtly creating a sense of connection. So, for instance, if someone is speaking very quickly and loudly, you might subtly increase your own pace and volume just slightly to try and establish a sense of alignment.
So it's about finding a common ground.
Precisely. And the COE book also emphasizes the importance of active listening.
Oh yeah, active listening is key.
Even if you disagree with someone, making a genuine effort to hear and understand their perspective can often help to diffuse a tense situation.
It's about validating their feelings, even if you don't agree with their words.
Exactly. And sometimes that's all it takes to de-escalate a situation.
Wow, we've covered so much ground already.
I know, right?
From body language and mental triggers to audience analysis and dealing with difficult people.
Communication is a complex thing.
It really is.
Yeah.
But it's also so fascinating.
Absolutely.
And I think one of the most important things we've learned so far is that communication is a skill.
100%. It's not something you're born with. It's something you can learn and develop over time.
And it's about being mindful, both of what we say and how we say it.
Every little thing matters. Our posture, our eye contact, our tone of voice.
It's like we're all conductors of an orchestra.
I likes that.
Every gesture, every inflection, every pause is a note that contributes to the symphony of communication. Okay, so before we move on to our final segment, I want to circle back to something we talked about earlier. The idea of self-awareness. The COE book really emphasizes this. Why is self-awareness so crucial for becoming a better communicator?
I think it's because you can't really connect with others if you don't understand yourself first.
Right. That makes sense.
It's the foundation for being authentic, for having empathy, for building those genuine connections.
So it's about recognizing our strengths and weaknesses,
Mhm.
our values, our beliefs.
Exactly. And also, those little biases and assumptions we all have, even those pesky blind spots.
Right. It's like if we're not aware of those things, they can really trip us up when we're trying to communicate with people, especially people who are different from us.
Definitely. Self-awareness helps us to see things from other people's perspectives
Hmm.
and to communicate in a way that resonates with them.
Okay, so let's go back to that communication triangle because I think it's such a useful visual.
Yeah, I like that triangle.
So we have you in the center and then voice and body on either side. What are some ways we can strengthen each of those points?
Okay, so let's start with you, the foundation of the triangle.
Okay.
This is where self-awareness comes in. The COE book talks about understanding your values, your beliefs, your communication style.
Right.
It's asking, what are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? What messages do you want to convey to the world?
It's like figuring out your personal brand of communication.
Yeah, exactly. Like, are you more of a straight to the point kind of communicator? Or are you someone who likes to tell stories and use humor and anecdotes?
I think I'm more of a storyteller.
Me too. So once you have a better understanding of your own style, you can start to work on your voice and your body to align with that.
Okay.
So for voice, you want to think about things like your tone, your pitch, your pace, your volume.
It's like, am I speaking clearly? Am I speaking with confidence?
Right. And are you using vocal variety to keep people engaged?
I see. So it's not just about what you say, but how you say it.
Exactly. And then for body, well, that's all that nonverbal stuff we talked about. Your posture, your eye contact, your gestures, your facial expressions.
Right. All those little signals that we're sending without even realizing it.
It's really amazing how much we can communicate without even saying a word. And the COE book encourages us to become more aware of these nonverbal cues. It's like becoming a detective of communication.
I love that. A communication detective. Okay, so let's shift our focus to something the COE book calls your network.
Your network, okay.
It basically means the people you're communicating with. So why is understanding your audience so important?
Because communication is all about creating shared understanding, right?
Right.
And in order to do that effectively, you need to tailor your message so that it resonates with the specific people you're talking to.
So you're saying there's no one right way to communicate?
Exactly. Different audiences have different needs, expectations, and ways of processing information.
Makes sense. So how do we actually get to know our audience better?
Well, the COE book has some ideas. It suggests thinking about demographics first,
Yeah.
their age, background, profession, interests.
Right.
But you also want to consider their values and beliefs.
Mhm.
And also think about their communication style. Are they more formal or informal? Do they like things to be direct, or do they prefer a more nuanced approach?
Those are all great points. It's really about trying to understand the other person's perspective and how they like to receive information.
Totally. And the more you understand your audience, the better you'll be able to connect with them authentically.
Okay, let's change gears for a minute and talk about something that can be really challenging. Dealing with difficult people.
Ooh, yeah. Everyone has to deal with those from time to time.
We've all got those people in our lives, right? The ones who interrupt constantly, the chronic complainers, the masters of passive aggression.
Yeah. They can be so draining.
So I was wondering, does the COE book have any advice on how to navigate those situations?
Well, it doesn't explicitly talk about difficult people per se, but it does give some really interesting insights that we can apply. Remember limbic synchrony?
Yeah, the mirroring thing.
Right. Well, it turns out that that can actually be super effective for building rapport, even with someone who's being difficult.
So if someone's being aggressive or confrontational, I should match their energy.
Not quite. It's not about mirroring their negative behavior. It's more about subtly creating a sense of connection.
I see.
So, like, if someone's talking really fast and loud, You might try subtly increasing your own pace and volume just a little bit.
Just to try and find a common ground.
Exactly. And the CO ebook also emphasizes active listening.
Oh, yeah. Active listening. That's always a good one.
Even if you totally disagree with someone, just making that effort to really hear them and try to understand where they're coming from,
Right.
that can go a long way in diffusing tension.
It's about acknowledging their feelings, even if their words are frustrating.
Exactly. Sometimes that validation is all it takes.
Wow, this deep dive has been amazing so
I
far.
know, right?
We've covered so much. Body language, mental triggers, audience analysis, dealing with difficult people. It's incredible how much there is to learn about communication.
It really is a fascinating field, isn't it?
It is. And one of the key things I'm taking away from all this is that communication is a skill. It's not something you're born with. It's something you can learn and develop.
Totally agree. It's like any other skill, the more you practice, the better you get.
And it's about being mindful, both what you say and how you say it.
Right. Every little thing matters. Our posture, our eye contact, or our tone of voice.
It's like we're all conductors of an orchestra. And every gesture, every inflection, every pause, it's all part of the symphony of communication.
I love that analogy. It's so true.
Okay, so before we wrap things up, I want to circle back to a concept we touched on earlier. The idea of self-awareness. Your source really emphasizes this.
Yeah.
Why is self-awareness so critical for being a great communicator?
Well, I think it all comes down to authenticity. Like you can't really connect with others on a genuine level if you don't even understand yourself.
Right, so it's like the more self-aware we are, the more authentic we can be in our communication.
Exactly. And the source actually digs into some pretty interesting strategies for dealing with those inner critics, those fears and anxieties that can hold us back in communication.
Oh, interesting. So it's not just about external techniques like body language and stuff. It's also about our internal state.
Exactly. It starts with kind of normalizing those feelings.
Mhm.
Even Dale Carnegie, like way back in the day, he recognized that not being able to communicate effectively can make our personality seem smaller.
Oh, wow. That's interesting. So he was acknowledging that everyone feels that fear sometime.
Yeah. Like, it's a totally normal human experience to feel nervous or insecure when you're communicating, especially in high-stakes situations.
Okay, so if it's normal, how do we deal with it? Does the source give any tips?
Absolutely. It talks about two main approaches: external strategies and internal strategies.
Okay, tell me more.
So the external strategies are all about preparation and practice. The more prepared you are, the less likely you are to get overwhelmed by those anxious feelings.
Makes sense. Preparation builds confidence. But what about the internal strategies? How can we boost our confidence from the inside out?
Well, the source recommends things like recalling past successes, those times when you really nailed it. It also suggests listening to music that inspires you or using positive imagery to shift your mindset.
So it's like giving yourself a mental pep talk.
Exactly. It's about consciously shifting your emotional state to a place of confidence and empowerment. And, it kind of ties back to that communication triangle.
Oh yeah, how so?
Well, remember, you are the foundation of that triangle. So if you're feeling shaky or insecure on the inside, it's going to show up in your voice, your body language, everything.
Right. So taking care of our internal state is just as important as mastering those external techniques.
Absolutely. Okay, so I have to share this one last amazing insight from the source.
Okay, hit me.
It's from Amy Cuddy. She's a Harvard professor who studies nonverbal communication, and she says that our brains actually judge trustworthiness and respect before they even decide if they like someone.
Wow, seriously.
Yeah, it's like an evolutionary thing. Our brains are wired to size people up really quickly to see if they're a potential threat.
That's fascinating.
Yeah.
So even before we've had a chance to say a word, people are already forming impressions about us based on our body language.
Exactly. And while we can't control everything about how people perceive us, we can definitely be more mindful of the signals we're sending.
So those basics we were talking about earlier, good posture, eye contact, a genuine smile, those really do make a difference.
They totally do. And the great thing is, the more we understand the science of communication, the better we become at crafting the message we want to send to the world.
This deep dive has been incredible. I feel like we've uncovered so many valuable tools and strategies for becoming better communicators.
Me too. It's amazing how much we've learned about body language, mental triggers, self-awareness, knowing our audience. It's just been so insightful.
And I love how the source doesn't just present these ideas in a theoretical way. It gives really practical tips and examples that we can actually use in our daily lives.
Exactly. It's all about taking this knowledge and putting it into practice.
Okay, so before we sign off, I want to leave our listeners with a final thought-provoking question to ponder. We've talked a lot about how communication is about making things common, about building bridges between ourselves and others. But what does that mean when we're trying to connect with people who are vastly different from us? How can we use these communication tools to foster understanding and empathy across cultures, backgrounds, and beliefs? It's a big question, but one that's definitely worth exploring.
Absolutely. Happy communicating.